his shoulder.
A part of her mind screamed in alarm, but the signal was faint, lost in a fog of profound weariness. The fabric of his suit was smooth against her cheek, and the heat emanating from him was a strange comfort. She felt a subtle shift as he adjusted his position, but he didn't push her away. Instead, a large, warm hand came to rest gently on her arm, a gesture that was both possessive and profoundly steadying. The last thing she remembered was the rhythm of his breathing, the clean scent of him filling her senses, and a fleeting, impossible thought: safe. A gentle chime roused her. Alara's eyes fluttered open to the blinding glare of the Nevada sun streaming through the airplane window. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then, the memories of the past 48 hours flooded back, and with them, a jolt of pure horror. She was still leaning against him, her head on his shoulder, his hand still resting on her arm, his thumb drawing slow, deliberate circles against her skin. She shot upright, her cheeks flaming with embarrassment. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just so tired." "It's fine," the man said. His voice was the same low rumble, but it seemed rougher now, charged with an emotion she couldn't decipher. He was looking at her, and the intensity in his whiskey-colored eyes was even greater than before. It was a raw, possessive gaze, the look of a dragon staring at a piece of gold it had just discovered. "You needed the rest," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "You slept the entire flight. Before we continue, please, if you truly appreciate my efforts, do subscribe to encourage me, please." Chapter 1. The exhaustion was a physical entity, a leaden cloak draped over Alara's shoulders. It had been 48 hours since she'd last slept, 48 hours of gut-churning fear and adrenaline-fueled motion. Her world had shrunk to the simple, desperate goal of putting as many miles as possible between herself and Chicago, between her and Marco. The stale, recycled air of the airport terminal was thick with the scent of unwashed bodies and fast food grease, but all Alara could smell was the phantom stench of Marco's cheap cologne. Her boarding pass, crumpled and damp in her trembling hand, was a flimsy ticket to a new life, a one-way fare to a city of sin where she prayed she could become just another ghost. Las Vegas. A place so loud and bright, she hoped it would be easy to disappear. Every dollar she had in the world, scraped together from a year of hoarded tips and sold possessions, had gone into this flight. There was no plan B. The final boarding call for her flight to Vegas crackled over the intercom, jarring her from her stupor. She shuffled forward with the last dregs of the crowd, her head down, her movements sluggish. She clutched the thin strap of her worn backpack, which held everything she owned: a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and $312 in cash. It felt pathetic. It felt like everything. The plane was a chaos of people shoving bags into overhead compartments and jostling for armrests. Her seat was in the middle, a claustrophobic sliver of space between a woman who was already reapplying lipstick and the window. Alara squeezed past, murmuring an apology, and collapsed into the seat. The roar of her own blood in her ears was louder than the cabin noise. Just a few more hours, she told herself, squeezing her eyes shut. Just get in the air. "Excuse me." The voice was not loud, but it cut through her exhaustion like a razor. It was deep, laced with a gravelly timbre that vibrated through the seat and straight into her bones. She opened her eyes. A man was standing in the aisle, looking down at her, his expression a mask of cool indifference. He was gesturing to the seat beside her, the one by the window. He was supposed to be in the aisle seat. He had switched his ticket with the lipstick lady. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, shifting to let him pass. He settled into the seat with an economy of movement that spoke of innate power. He was wearing a black suit that was so perfectly tailored it seemed molded to his broad shoulders and chest. It probably cost more than her entire escape fund. His hair was as dark as a raven's wing, cut sharp and severe. A strong jaw, a straight nose, and a mouth that looked like it had never curved into a genuine smile. Then his eyes met hers. They were the color of aged whiskey, and they held an intensity that made the air leave her lungs. He didn't just look at her. He seemed to see through her, peeling back the layers of exhaustion and fear to the raw, terrified core of her. A shiver, completely unrelated to the cabin's chilly air, traced a path down her spine. The man radiated a dangerous authority, a quiet dominance that was 1,000 times more intimidating than Marco's loud, brutish posturing. This was a predator of a different class entirely. She quickly turned her head, fixing her gaze on the seat back in front of her. She could feel his presence beside her like a physical weight, a magnetic pull she had to consciously resist. His scent filled her small space, a clean, masculine fragrance of expensive cologne, sandalwood, and something else, something primal and uniquely him. It was intoxicating, and that terrified her more than anything. The plane taxied, the engines whining as they prepared for takeoff. Alara clutched the armrests, her knuckles white. She hated flying, hated the feeling of being trapped, of surrendering control. The gentle pressure of takeoff pushed her back into her seat, and as the ground fell away, a single, hot tear escaped her eye and traced a path through the grime on her cheek. She was finally free. She was finally, utterly alone. The exhaustion she had held at bay for 2 days crashed over her in a tidal wave. Her eyelids felt like they were lined with sand. The steady drone of the engines was a hypnotic lullaby, and the sheer relief of being in the air, of moving, was a potent sedative. Her head lolled once, then twice. She tried to fight it, tried to stay upright, to maintain the small barrier of personal space between herself and the dangerous man beside her. But her body had reached its limit. Her control evaporated, and her head drifted sideways until it came to rest against something solid and warm. His shoulder. A part of her mind screamed in alarm, but the signal was faint, lost in a fog of profound weariness. The fabric of his suit was smooth against her cheek, and the heat emanating from him was a strange comfort. She felt a subtle shift as he adjusted his position, but he didn't push her away. Instead, a large, warm hand came to rest gently on her arm, a gesture that was both possessive and profoundly steadying. The last thing she remembered was the rhythm of his breathing, the clean scent of him filling her senses, and a fleeting, impossible thought: safe. A gentle chime roused her. Alara's eyes fluttered open to the blinding glare of the Nevada sun streaming through the airplane window. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then, the memories of the past 48 hours flooded back, and with them, a jolt of pure horror. She was still leaning against him, her head on his shoulder, his hand still resting on her arm, his thumb drawing slow, deliberate circles against her skin. She shot upright, her cheeks flaming with embarrassment. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just so tired." "It's fine," the man said. His voice was the same low rumble, but it seemed rougher now, charged with an emotion she couldn't decipher. He was looking at her, and the intensity in his whiskey-colored eyes was even greater than before. It was a raw, possessive gaze, the look of a dragon staring at a piece of gold it had just discovered. "You needed the rest," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "You slept the entire flight." The entire flight? She had been completely unconscious, vulnerable, resting on a total stranger. A stranger who looked like he broke men for a living. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, announcing their descent into Las Vegas. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. She needed to get away from him, to disappear into the anonymity of the airport crowd. "Well, thank you for not waking me," she stammered, gathering her backpack. "I appreciate it." She made to stand as soon as the plane docked at the gate, desperate to be the first one off, but his hand on her arm stopped her. His grip was gentle but unyielding. "There's no need to rush," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. She froze, every instinct screaming at her. She had run from one predator only to fall asleep on the shoulder of another. "I have to go. I have someone meeting me." It was a clumsy lie, and the slight, knowing curl of his lip told her he knew it. "No, you don't," he said, his voice flat and certain. He stood, his large frame blocking the aisle, forcing her to remain seated. He effortlessly retrieved a sleek leather briefcase from the overhead compartment, then turned his attention back to her. "We'll wait for the cabin to clear." Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. "I don't know who you are. Please let me pass." "I am Dante Moretti." He said the name as if it should mean something to her, as if it explained everything. "And you will be coming with me." "I'm not going anywhere with you." She tried to sound firm, but her voice trembled. He leaned down, bringing his face closer to hers. The proximity was overwhelming. She could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You have $312, a single change of clothes, and a man named Marco who is likely already looking for you," he murmured, his voice a silken threat. "You have nowhere to go and no one to turn to. You think landing in Vegas makes you free? It just puts you in a different kind of jungle, little one. A much more dangerous one." Her blood ran cold. How could he know? How could he possibly know any of that? "How did you?" "I had my people look into you while you were sleeping," he said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "I needed to know who had fallen into my lap." The casual violation of her privacy was staggering. He had stripped her bare, metaphorically, while she slept on his shoulder. The last of the passengers filed out, leaving the three of them, Alara, Dante, and a silent, imposing man in a suit who had appeared at the front of the cabin and was now waiting for them, in the empty plane. "It's time to go, Alara," Dante said softly. He knew her name. The sound of it on his lips, spoken with such possessive certainty, was the final crack in her composure. Tears of fear and frustration welled in her eyes. "I never told you my name." A slow, predatory smile touched Dante's lips for the first time. It did not reach his eyes. "You didn't have to. I've known it my entire life. I just didn't know the face that went with it." He extended a hand to her.
"Come.
"Your new life is waiting." She stared at his outstretched hand, then at his unyielding face. The man waiting for them took a step forward, his intentions clear. There was no escape. The plane, which had been her vessel to freedom, had become a trap. And as she looked into Dante Moretti's possessive, knowing eyes, a terrifying realization dawned on her. She hadn't escaped at all. She had just been claimed. Chapter 2. The walk from the plane to the terminal was a blur of surreal terror. Dante's hand was a firm, inescapable brand at the small of her back, guiding her through the jet bridge with an authority that brooked no argument. The silent, imposing man, who Dante had called Leo, walked a few paces ahead, clearing a path through the throng of disembarking passengers as if by sheer presence alone. People seemed to melt away from him, their gazes sliding off his severe, emotionless face. Alara's mind raced, searching for an escape. A scream, a desperate dash for the crowds. But the look in Dante's eyes stopped her. It wasn't a look of overt threat. It was a look of absolute certainty. He knew she wouldn't scream. He knew she wouldn't run. It was the calm confidence of a master who knows the leash is unbreakable. Her exhaustion, which had momentarily receded in the face of adrenaline, returned with a vengeance, weighing down her limbs, clouding her thoughts. She was too tired to fight, too broken to do anything but obey the pressure of his hand. They didn't go to the main terminal. Leo swiped a keycard at an unmarked door, leading them into a sterile, private corridor that bypassed the chaos of baggage claim and security. There were no lines, no TSA agents, no crying children. Just the quiet, echoing clicks of their expensive shoes on the polished concrete floor, a sound that seemed to be counting down the seconds of her rapidly disappearing freedom. "Where are we going?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Home," Dante answered without looking at her. The word was a punch to the gut. This wasn't a rescue. It was an abduction. They emerged into a private parking garage, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and cool concrete. A gleaming black Rolls-Royce, so dark it seemed to absorb the light, waited for them, its engine purring silently. Leo opened the rear door, and Dante guided her inside with that same unyielding hand. The door closed with a heavy, final thunk, sealing her inside the opulent cage. The interior was a world of supple black leather and polished wood that smelled of money and power. The windows were tinted so dark that the outside world was a muted, distant spectacle. Dante slid in beside her, his thigh brushing against hers, an electric contact that made her flinch. The space, though luxurious, felt incredibly small, charged with his dominant presence. Leo took the driver's seat, and the car pulled away with a smoothness that was almost disorienting. They merged onto the freeway, and the glittering, insomniac skyline of Las Vegas exploded into view. The Strip was a river of neon, a chaotic symphony of light and promise. From inside the silent, climate-controlled tomb of the Rolls-Royce, it looked like another planet. Beautiful, vibrant, and completely untouchable. "Welcome to Las Vegas," Dante said, his voice a low murmur beside her. "I want to go home," she said, the words barely a breath. It was a stupid thing to say. She had no home. Chicago was a ghost town of bad memories. She'd just spent her last dollar to escape. "You are," he replied, turning to face her. In the shifting kaleidoscope of the city lights passing over his face, his features seemed carved from granite and shadow. "You just don't know it yet. You're insane," she whispered, turning to look at him fully, trying to find some flicker of reason in his whiskey-colored eyes. "You don't know me. You can't just claim a person you met on a plane." A flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, or pity, crossed his face. "I didn't meet you on a plane, Alara. I recognized you. There is a profound difference." "Recognized me from where?" "I've never seen you before in my life." He fell silent for a long moment, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. "In my family," he began, his voice taking on a strange, almost reverent tone, "there are stories. Legends, you might call them, about a fated connection. A bond that transcends choice or time. A single soul, split in two, destined to find its other half." Alara stared at him, a cold dread mixing with utter disbelief. He wasn't just a criminal. He was delusional. A powerful, wealthy, dangerous man who was completely unhinged. You think I'm your soulmate?" The word tasted absurd on her tongue. "I don't think it," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with a conviction that chilled her to the bone. "I know it. The moment you sat down beside me, I felt it. A settling in my soul. A quiet that I have never known." He lifted a hand, and before she could react, his thumb brushed against the pulse point on her wrist. A jolt, hot and sharp, shot up her arm. And then there was this. His finger traced a faint, silvery mark on her inner wrist, a delicate swirl that had been there since her birth. She'd always thought it was just a birthmark. "Only I can see it for what it is," he murmured. "The sigil. The mark of my mate. It's been described in my family's journals for centuries. I have been looking for it my entire life." Alara snatched her hand back as if burned. "That's a birthmark. And you're crazy. This is a kidnapping. You're a rich lunatic who has some weird romantic fantasy, and you've decided to force me into it." He didn't deny it. He didn't even seem offended. He simply watched her, his expression unreadable. "Call it what you will. The name doesn't change the reality. You are mine. You have always been mine. Your life before me was merely a prelude." The car turned off the main thoroughfare, gliding through a set of imposing iron gates and into a private, underground entrance. The Rolls-Royce came to a stop in front of a bank of private elevators. Leo was already out, holding the door for them. "I won't do this," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I won't be your prisoner." "A gilded cage is still a cage," Dante acknowledged, his gaze unwavering. "But it is infinitely safer than the alternative." He nodded to Leo, and a moment later, the driver's phone was in Dante's hand. He swiped the screen and turned it to face her. It was a live security feed, time-stamped just moments ago. It showed the chaotic entrance of a budget casino off the Strip. And standing there, his face tight with fury, scanning the crowd like a starved wolf, was Marco. He was wearing the same cheap leather jacket, his posture radiating a low-level thuggery that she knew all too well. Alara's breath hitched. It was impossible. He couldn't be here. How? She breathed. You used your debit card to buy a bottle of water at a gas station just outside Chicago, Dante explained, his voice devoid of emotion. He has friends. Lowlifes with access to things they shouldn't. He knew what city you were flying to before your plane ever took off. He was on a later flight. The careful illusion of her escape, her fragile hope for a new life, shattered into a million pieces. She hadn't been running to freedom. She'd been running straight into another trap, one of her own making. He is not a good man, Alara, Dante continued, his voice soft but laced with steel. He works as an enforcer for the O'Malley crew out of Chicago. Petty thieves and drug runners. He thinks you stole money from him. He is not here to ask you to come home. He is here to punish you, to make an example of you. He put the phone away, his gaze locking with hers. So, you have a choice. You can walk out of this car right now. Leo will give you the $300 from your backpack, and you can take your chances in my city. Try to hide from a man who is hunting you, a man who knows what you look like. Or, you can come upstairs with me, where he can never touch you again. Tears streamed down her face now, hot and silent. It wasn't a choice. It was an ultimatum, delivered by a man who had orchestrated this moment from the second she'd fallen asleep on his shoulder. He hadn't just stumbled upon her. He had investigated her, dissected her miserable life, and laid her deepest fears bare. He had shown her the monster in the dark, only to present himself as the more powerful, more sophisticated monster who could keep the other at bay. I see you understand, he said softly, seeing the fight drain out of her. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. His touch was electric, a spark of possessive heat that was both terrifying and strangely grounding. She nodded numbly, the gesture of surrender feeling like a betrayal of the woman who had fought so hard to get on that plane. Without another word, she allowed him to lead her out of the car and into the private elevator. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, and the view stole what little breath she had left. They were at the top of the world. 3 of the 4 walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic, godlike vista of the glittering, sprawling city below. The space was immense, a cavern of white marble, black leather, and gleaming chrome. A massive, modern fireplace was set into one wall, its flames dancing silently. A grand piano sat in one corner, its black lacquer gleaming. It was the most beautiful place she had ever seen, and it felt as cold and empty as a mausoleum. What is this place? She whispered. My home, Dante said from behind her. He had moved to stand so close she could feel his body heat. Our home. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his grip firm and proprietary. She flinched but didn't pull away. She was too tired, too defeated. He led her toward the vast wall of glass until they were standing before it, looking down at the river of lights that was the Strip. Look at it, Alara, he murmured, his voice a low vibration against her ear. Every light, every casino, every shadow, it all belongs to me. This city is mine. And everyone in it, including your Marco, operates only with my permission. She stared out at the vibrant, predatory city, at the endless sea of lights that had once represented hope. Now, they only illuminated the bars of her new cage. You are safe here, Dante said, his voice dropping, taking on that same possessive, silken tone from the car. You are protected. Nothing and no one will ever harm you again. He lowered his head, his lips brushing against the shell of her ear as he spoke the final words. Because you, Alara, belong to me now. His words wrapped around her, a verdict and a promise. She had run from a small-time monster only to be claimed by a king. And as she stood there, trapped in a palace in the sky, she realized the terrifying truth. Her escape hadn't ended in Las Vegas. It had ended the moment she had fallen asleep on the wrong shoulder. Chapter 3. Alara woke to silence. Not the thin, tense silence of her cramped Chicago apartment, where the sounds of sirens and shouting were a constant backdrop, but a deep, absolute quiet that felt as heavy and expensive as the silk sheets she was tangled in. For a moment, suspended between sleep and awareness, she felt a profound sense of peace. The exhaustion that had been her constant companion for years was gone, replaced by a bone-deep restfulness. Then, she opened her eyes. She was in a vast bedroom that was the epitome of minimalist luxury. The bed was the size of her entire former living room. One wall was a sheet of glass, looking out onto the sprawling desert landscape beyond the city, the morning sun painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold. The furniture was sleek, dark wood and chrome, and there was not a single personal item in sight. It was a room from a magazine, beautiful and utterly soulless. Panic, cold and familiar, began to prickle at the edges of her newfound calm.
Dante.
The plane.
The car.
The penthouse. It hadn't been a nightmare. She sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. She was wearing a simple, black silk chemise. It wasn't hers. A wave of violation washed over her. Had he undressed her? A quick, frantic check revealed no signs of anything other than being put to bed. The thought was somehow both a relief and a new kind of terror. He had handled her while she was unconscious, treating her like a doll to be arranged. Her backpack, with its meager, familiar contents, was nowhere to be seen. In its place, on a sleek black armchair, was a neatly folded set of clothes, soft gray cashmere sweatpants, and a matching sweater. Lingerie, still in its packaging, lay beside it. Everything looked impossibly soft and ridiculously expensive. A message. Your old life is gone.
This is you now.
Her first instinct was to refuse, to stay in the borrowed chemise as a form of protest. But the thought of facing him in something so intimate was unbearable. Numbly, she got up and dressed. The clothes fit perfectly, clinging to her form with a soft embrace that felt both comforting and sinister. He had guessed her size. Or, more likely, he hadn't guessed at all. She padded barefoot out of the bedroom, her steps silent on the cold marble floor. The penthouse was empty, the morning light streaming through the massive windows and glinting off the sterile surfaces. It was less a home and more a monument to wealth and control. Good morning. The voice came from the kitchen area, a vast expanse of stainless steel and black granite. An older woman with salt and pepper hair pulled into a severe bun was wiping down an already immaculate countertop. Her expression was neutral, her eyes missing nothing. I am Sophia, she said, her voice polite but without warmth. I am the housekeeper. Mr. Moretti is in his office. He requested I prepare breakfast for you when you woke. What would you like? Alara's mind went blank. The simple question felt like a test she didn't know how to pass. I'm not hungry. Thank you. Mr. Moretti insists you eat, Sophia stated, not unkindly, but with an air of finality. He said you would appreciate fresh orange juice and coffee. And perhaps some toast. He had anticipated her refusal, her polite deflection. He had planned for it. The level of forethought was suffocating. Fine, she whispered. Toast is fine. As Sophia moved with quiet efficiency, Alara wandered into the main living area, drawn once again to the wall of glass. The city below was waking up, the morning traffic a distant, silent river. She was a prisoner in a tower, looking down on a world she could no longer touch. I see you've met Sophia. Dante's voice came from behind her. She turned to see him leaning against the doorframe of a room she now realized was his office. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing strong, lightly tanned skin and a ridiculously expensive-looking watch. He held a tablet in one hand, but his attention was entirely on her. His gaze swept over her, from her bare feet to the way the cashmere sweater draped over her shoulders. A flicker of possessive satisfaction lit his whiskey eyes. The clothes suit you. Where are my things? She asked, her voice tight. My backpack. They've been disposed of, he said dismissively, as if she'd asked about a piece of trash. You have no need for them anymore. Anything you require will be provided for you. He gestured to a series of closed doors. A wardrobe has been arranged. I trust you will find it adequate. You had no right, she said, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. I have every right, he countered, his voice dropping into that low, dangerous register. He pushed off the doorframe and walked toward her, his movements fluid and predatory. He stopped just inches from her, forcing her to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. You are under my roof, under my protection. That means you live by my rules. The first rule is that you will sever all ties to your former life. It no longer exists. This isn't protection, she shot back, fueled by a surge of desperate anger. This is a prison. Is it? He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his touch shockingly gentle. In prison, are you given silk sheets and cashmere? Are you given a chef who will prepare whatever you desire? Are you given a view that kings would envy? Those things don't make it any less a cage. The cage, Alara, is not to keep you in. It is to keep the wolves out. His expression hardened. Speaking of which, the Marco problem has been dealt with. Her blood went cold. What does that mean? What did you do? Leo had a conversation with him this morning, Dante said, his tone casual, as if discussing the weather. Mr. O'Malley was persuaded to leave Las Vegas. Permanently. He will not be troubling you again. Persuaded how? She whispered, dread coiling in her stomach. A phone on the marble coffee table buzzed. It was Leo. Dante answered it on speaker. Sir. Leo's voice was as toneless as ever. The package has been delivered to the Chicago office. They understand the terms of the new arrangement. The liability has been retired. Retired. The word was so clinical, so final. It hung in the air between them, a testament to the brutal, unseen power Dante wielded. Marco wasn't just gone. He was erased. A problem solved with a single phone call. A wave of dizziness washed over Alara. A part of her, a dark, hidden part, was relieved. The constant, gnawing fear of Marco, a fear that had dictated her every move for the past year, was gone. But the relief was immediately swallowed by horror. This man, this stranger, had just casually admitted to having her ex-boyfriend murdered. For her. You killed him, she breathed, taking a step back. Dante's expression didn't change. I eliminated a threat to you. To what is mine? There is a difference. He ended the call and tossed the phone back on the table. Now you see, the world I inhabit is not the same as the one you left. Here, problems are not discussed. They are solved. And you, Alara, are now at the very center of my world. He took a step toward her, closing the distance she had created. Which brings me to my second rule. You are not to leave this penthouse without me. Not for any reason. Understand? She could only nod, her throat tight with unshed tears. Good. He seemed to take her horrified silence as compliance. Sophia will show you to your rooms.
Rest. Eat.
This evening, we have an engagement. An engagement? The word sounded insane. A business dinner, he clarified. It is time to introduce you to my world. You will be expected to play the part of my devoted partner. It is crucial, for your own safety, that no one sees you as a weakness. They must see you as my strength. As my queen. He reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her skin. Do not be afraid, mia cara. I will be with you. I will not let anyone harm you. The Italian endearment, spoken in his low, gravelly voice, was a caress and a brand. He was a monster, a murderer, a kidnapper. He had destroyed her life and was now dictating the terms of her new one. But as he looked at her, the raw possessiveness in his eyes was mingled with something else, a fierce, unwavering protectiveness that was as terrifying as it was seductive. He had killed for her. He had erased the man who haunted her nightmares without a second thought. And in the twisted, dark reality of her new life, that was the most terrifyingly comforting thought of all. She was the property of Dante Moretti. And God help anyone who tried to take her from him. Chapter 4. The hours that followed were a masterclass in psychological conditioning. Sophia, the silent housekeeper, became her warden. She showed Alara to her rooms, a suite of interconnected spaces that was larger than any apartment she had ever lived in. There was a sitting room with its own fireplace, a bathroom clad in floor-to-ceiling Italian marble with a tub that could have fit 4 people, and a walk-in closet that was the size of a boutique. And in that closet, her old life was officially declared dead. Racks upon racks of clothes lined the walls. Gowns of silk and satin, cashmere sweaters in every conceivable color, tailored trousers and blouses so fine they were translucent. An entire wall was dedicated to shoes, from delicate heels to casual flats. Another held a collection of handbags that probably cost more than a down payment on a house. There was nothing of her in this room. No worn-out concert t-shirts, no favorite pair of jeans, no scuffed boots. It was the wardrobe of a stranger, a perfectly curated collection for the woman Dante Moretti intended her to be. Alara ran a hand over a silk blouse, the fabric cool and alien against her skin. It was a beautiful prison, but every beautiful object was just another bar on the cage. She felt a profound sense of disassociation, as if she were watching a movie about someone else's life. Mr. Moretti has arranged for a stylist and a makeup artist to assist you in preparing for this evening, Sophia announced from the doorway, her presence as unobtrusive and constant as a security camera. They will arrive at 5. That's not necessary, Alara said, her voice sounding weak in the cavernous closet. It is necessary, Sophia corrected gently. Tonight, you will be formally introduced. Your appearance must be impeccable. The implication was clear. Her appearance was a reflection on him. She was not a person. She was an accessory to his power. At precisely 5 o'clock, 2 women and a man, all dressed in severe black, arrived. They worked with a quiet, professional reverence, speaking in hushed tones as they tweezed, curled, and painted. They transformed her, sculpting her into a creature of breathtaking elegance she didn't recognize. Her hair was swept up into a complicated knot, her eyes were made smoky and dramatic, and her lips were painted a deep, blood red. The dress they chose was a column of emerald green silk that clung to her every curve. It was simple, elegant, and impossibly sensual. It left her shoulders and back bare, making her feel both exposed and powerful. When they were finished, she stared at the stranger in the full-length mirror. This woman was beautiful, polished, and untouchable.
A queen, as he had said.
But her eyes were the eyes of a terrified animal in a trap. Perfect. Dante's voice came from the doorway. He had changed into a black suit that was even more exquisitely tailored than the one from the plane. He walked toward her, his whiskey eyes sweeping over her transformation with an expression of dark, possessive pride. You are a work of art, Mia Cara. He stopped in front of her, his gaze holding hers in the mirror. He opened a velvet box. Inside, nestled on a bed of black satin, was a necklace of brilliant, ice-white diamonds. It was intricate and stunning, designed to look like delicate, thorny vines. A gift, he said, his voice a low murmur. To mark the occasion. He moved behind her, and she stood frozen as he fastened the necklace around her throat. The diamonds were cold against her skin, the weight of them a tangible reminder of her captivity. It was not a gift, it was a collar. A beautiful, glittering, inescapable collar. Every queen needs her crown, he whispered, his lips brushing the sensitive skin just below her ear. A shiver coursed through her, a traitorous mix of fear and an electric thrill she refused to acknowledge. He placed his hands on her bare shoulders, his thumbs stroking her skin. Tonight, you will meet some of my associates. They will be watching you, studying you. They will be looking for weakness. He turned her to face him. You will show them none. You will be calm, you will be graceful, and you will defer to me in all things. Your only focus is me. Am I understood? She gave a tight, jerky nod.
Good.
His expression softened almost imperceptibly. I know this is an adjustment, but it is necessary. In my world, perception is reality. And tonight, they will perceive you as the untouchable, adored mate of Dante Moretti, my most prized possession. And they will know that to harm you, or even to disrespect you, is to invite a war they cannot win. The drive to the restaurant was conducted in a taut silence. They were in the Rolls-Royce again, gliding through the electric night of Las Vegas. Alara stared out the tinted window, the diamonds at her throat feeling colder and heavier with each passing moment. The restaurant was not a restaurant. It was a private, members-only club at the pinnacle of the Morpheus Tower, Dante's flagship casino. The name, Vespertine, was etched discreetly on a black marble wall next to a door manned by two men who were essentially mountains in tuxedos. They nodded respectfully as Dante led her inside. The interior was a dim, hushed world of black leather, dark wood, and gold accents. The patrons were a collection of men and a few women who radiated an aura of power and immense wealth. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and the low murmur of deals being made. Every eye turned to them as they entered, and a palpable hush fell over the room. They weren't just looking at her. They were assessing her, gauging her worth. Dante's hand was a constant, possessive weight on the small of her bare back, steering her through the room as if he owned it, which she realized he probably did. He led her to a secluded corner booth that offered a commanding view of the entire room, as well as the glittering city below. A man was already waiting for them. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and a deeply tanned face. He was immaculately dressed, but his eyes, small and dark like a reptile's, missed nothing. They raked over Alara with a look that was both appreciative and dismissive. "Dante," the man said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "You are late." "Business, Silvio," Dante replied smoothly, sliding into the booth and pulling Alara down beside him. "You know how it is." He draped an arm casually over the back of the seat, his fingers brushing against her bare shoulder. "Silvio Bellini, I would like to introduce you to Alara. My mate." The word hung in the air, a formal declaration. A claim. Silvio's eyes glittered. "A pleasure, my dear." He smiled, but it was a cold, reptilian thing. Dante has been the city's most eligible and most reclusive bachelor for a very long time. We were all beginning to wonder if a woman existed who could tame him. His gaze lingered on the diamond necklace. "I see he has spared no expense in acquiring you. Tell me, where did he find such a rare jewel?" The question was a calculated insult, reducing her to a commodity. Alara felt a flush of humiliation, but before she could react, Dante's fingers tightened on her shoulder. "I did not find her, Silvio," Dante said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level that made the air around them seem to crackle. "I reclaimed what has always been mine. Alara's place has always been at my side. The world is simply catching up to that fact." He picked up a wineglass and signaled a waiter. "She will have the Barolo. And bring a bottle of the Macallan 50 for Silvio. He has a long drive back to LA tonight, and will need something to warm his bones." It was a dismissal, polite on the surface, but utterly ruthless underneath. Silvio's cold smile didn't waver, but a flicker of respect, or perhaps fear, entered his eyes. He turned his attention back to Alara. "So, my dear, what did you do before our Dante swept you off your feet? A model? An actress?" Alara opened her mouth, but Dante answered for her. "Alara's past is not a topic for discussion." His voice was final. He then placed his hand on her thigh under the table, a possessive, grounding weight. It was a warning to Silvio, and a reminder to her of her role. Remembering his instructions, Alara took a slow sip of water, placed her hand over Dante's on her thigh, and looked directly at Silvio Bellini. She gave him a small, serene smile that she hoped looked enigmatic. "I have everything I need right here, Mr. Bellini," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you for your concern." For the first time, a genuine expression crossed Silvio's face. Surprise. He had expected a trophy, a beautiful, vacuous thing. He had not expected a woman who could meet his gaze without flinching. He glanced from her to Dante, and a slow understanding dawned in his reptilian eyes. This wasn't a whim. This was a changing of the guard. A new queen had been installed. He raised his glass. "To the happy couple, then," he said, the previous condescension gone from his voice. May your reign be long and prosperous. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of business talk she didn't understand. She sat in silence, playing her part, feeling Dante's hand on her, a constant anchor in a terrifying new sea. She watched him, saw the way the most powerful men in the room deferred to him, the way his quiet words carried the weight of absolute law. He wasn't just a rich man, he was a king in his own kingdom, and this was his court. On the ride back to the penthouse, the silence was different. It was no longer tense, but thick with unspoken thoughts. The adrenaline of the evening had worn off, leaving her feeling hollowed out and shaky. As they stepped out of the elevator into the vast, silent penthouse, Dante turned to her. In the dim light, his eyes were dark pools of unreadable emotion. "You did well tonight," he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment, a grade on her performance. "I did what you told me to do," she replied, her voice flat. "You did more than that," he said, stepping closer. "You showed him strength. You showed him that you are not a victim. You showed him that you are mine." He lifted a hand, his knuckles grazing her cheek. "Sylvia will go back to the families in LA and New York. He will tell them that the rumors are true, that Dante Moretti has found his mate, that she is not a weakness to be exploited, but a fortress to be respected. You have cemented my power tonight, Alara, more than any business deal ever could." The realization crashed down on her. The dinner, the dress, the diamonds, it was all a calculated power play. She was the ultimate status symbol, the living proof of his fated destiny, a myth made real. Her existence validated his claim not just on her, but on his entire empire. Tears of rage and helplessness pricked her eyes. "So that's all I am to you? A business asset? A symbol?" "You are everything to me," he said, his voice dropping to a rough, intense whisper. He tangled his fingers in her carefully styled hair, forcing her head back, exposing the line of her throat. "You are my obsession, my destiny, my queen, and my wife, in all ways that matter." Before she could process the word wife, his mouth descended on hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a kiss of possession, of branding. It was hungry and hard, a raw expression of the control he had maintained all evening. He tasted of expensive whiskey and dominance, and to her own profound shame, a jolt of pure, unadulterated heat shot through her. Her body, betrayed and exhausted, responded to his raw power even as her mind screamed in protest. He broke the kiss, leaving her breathless and clinging to his arms for support. His forehead rested against hers, his breathing heavy. "The performance is over," he said, his voice thick. He took her hand and began leading her not toward the guest suite she had woken up in, but down the marble hall toward the master bedroom. "But your role is not." He pushed open the heavy door to his room, a cavern of dark woods, black silk, and glass that overlooked the sleeping city. "From now on," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument as he pulled her into the darkness, "you sleep where you belong." The door clicked shut behind them, plunging them into the shadows, sealing her fate. She was his queen, and tonight, her reign would truly begin. Chapter 5. The heavy bedroom door clicked shut behind them, the sound echoing the finality of a prison cell locking. The only light came from the vast, glittering expanse of the city below, casting long, distorted shadows across the cavernous room. The air was cool and smelled of him, sandalwood, expensive linen, and that unique, primal scent that was pure Dante. He let go of her hand, and she instinctively backed away, her bare back hitting the cold glass of the window wall. The city lights felt like a million unblinking eyes watching her. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Please. I can't do this." Dante moved into the center of the room, unbuttoning his suit jacket and tossing it onto a sleek leather valet stand. He moved with a languid grace that was terrifyingly at odds with the tension coiling in her stomach. "You can and you will," he said, his voice calm, reasonable. "This is your room, Alara. This is your bed. Your place is beside me. It always has been." "You can and you will," he said, his voice calm, reasonable. "This is your room, Alara. This is your bed.
Your place is beside me.
It always has been. I don't even know you. The words burst out of her, a raw cry of desperation. You're a stranger. A man who has people retired. I am the man who saved you, he corrected, his voice never rising. He began to unfasten the buttons of his cuffs, his movements precise and unhurried. I am the man who has been searching for you since the day he was old enough to understand what the sigil on your wrist meant. I am the only man in the world who will never, ever harm you. He took a step toward her, and she flinched, pressing herself harder against the glass. His expression softened, a flicker of something that might have been regret crossing his features. I am not going to touch you, he said, his voice a low, rough murmur. Not until you are ready. Not until you ask for it. He paused, his gaze intense. But you will sleep in my bed. You will wake in my arms. I need to know you are safe. I need to feel you near me. The chaos in my head, it stops when you are close. You are the only quiet I have ever known. His confession, so raw and unexpected, threw her off balance. He wasn't just a monster exercising his power. He was a man driven by a profound, centuries-old belief that she was his cure, his peace. The idea was both narcissistic and tragically romantic. He reached for her, and she squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for a forced intimacy. Instead, his fingers found the clasp of the diamond necklace. With a soft click, the weight was gone from her neck. He then found the zipper on the back of her emerald gown. Turn around, he commanded softly. Numbly, robotically, she obeyed. She heard the soft rasp of the zipper and felt the cool air on her back as the silk parted. The dress pooled at her feet in a whisper of green, leaving her standing before him in nothing but the delicate scraps of lace lingerie the stylists had chosen. She crossed her arms over her chest, shivering, though the room was not cold. He didn't look at her body with lust, but with a strange, almost reverent ownership. He picked up a black silk robe from the foot of the bed and draped it over her shoulders. Get into bed, Alara. It was a command, not a request. Her defiance had crumbled, leaving only a hollowed-out exhaustion. Fighting him was like punching a mountain. It would only break her. Wordlessly, she slipped under the cool, heavy sheets of the enormous bed, pulling the covers up to her chin like a shield. She stayed rigidly on the very edge of the mattress, as far from the center as she could get. Dante disappeared into a closet that was the size of her old bedroom and emerged moments later wearing a pair of simple black pajama pants, his chest and shoulders bare. The dim light from the city cast shadows over the hard planes of his torso, revealing the body of a man honed for violence. He was a beautiful, terrifying predator. He slid into the bed on the other side, the mattress barely dipping under his weight. He lay on his back, his hands laced behind his head, staring up at the ceiling. The space between them felt like a chasm, a no-man's land charged with a static electricity that made every nerve in Alara's body scream. She lay there for what felt like hours, her body stiff as a board, listening to the sound of his slow, even breathing. He hadn't moved a muscle. He had promised not to touch her, and he was keeping that promise. The control he exerted, not just over her but over himself, was absolute. And in a way, that was more frightening than any physical threat. Sleep, when it finally came, was a black, dreamless pit of surrender. She woke slowly, drawn from the depths by a feeling of warmth and security she hadn't known was possible. Her body, in sleep, had betrayed her mind. She had curled toward his heat, and one of his heavy arms was now draped possessively over her waist. His hand rested on her hip, his thumb drawing slow, absent-minded circles. She was nestled against his side, her head tucked just under his chin. She went completely still, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was awake. She could feel the steady, calm rhythm of his heartbeat against her ear. He had been lying here, holding her, watching her sleep. "Good morning, Mia Cara," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. She tried to pull away, but his arm tightened, not painfully, but with an unyielding strength that made it clear she wasn't going anywhere.
"Easy," he said.
Just for a moment, She forced herself to lie still, every muscle screaming in protest. He smelled of sleep and clean soap and something uniquely male. It was dangerously intoxicating. After a long moment that stretched into an eternity, he sighed, a sound of deep contentment, and released her. She scrambled to the edge of the bed, putting distance between them. Dante sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. His back was a landscape of taut muscle and faded white scars that spoke of a life she couldn't begin to imagine. "Sophia has prepared breakfast," he said, standing and pulling on a fresh shirt. "And I have something for you." After a silent, tense breakfast where she pushed food around her plate under Sophia's watchful eye, Dante led her into his office. It was as minimalist and controlled as the rest of the penthouse. The massive desk was clear except for a laptop and a small, sleek black box. He pushed the box toward her. "Open it." With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was the newest, most expensive smartphone on the market. "I don't want it," she said automatically. "It is not a request," he said, his patience already wearing thin. "It is a tool. For your convenience. And for my peace of mind." He took the phone out of the box and turned it on. The screen lit up, showing a simple, elegant wallpaper of a desert landscape. "It has been secured. It cannot be tracked by outside parties. It has only one number programmed into it." He tapped the screen, and a single contact appeared. "Dante. If you need anything at all, you press this button. It will connect you directly to me, wherever I am. This phone does not leave your side. Ever. It is your lifeline. And it is my leash." The blunt honesty of the last word was a slap in the face. This wasn't a gift. It was another layer of control, a direct line to her captor, masquerading as an instrument of safety. "What if I need to call someone else?" she asked, testing the boundaries. My grandmother." It was a lie. Her grandmother had died years ago. His eyes narrowed. "Your grandmother is dead, Alara. There is no one else. Your old life, and everyone in it, is gone. Your world is now me. It is this penthouse. It is the life I am giving you." He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city he ruled. "You will grow accustomed to it. In time, you will even come to appreciate it. The safety, the luxury, the freedom from fear." He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "You are the queen of this kingdom, Alara. And a queen does not need to look back at the village she came from. Her only concern is the throne she sits upon, and the king who sits beside her." He left her then, alone in the vast, silent office with the cold, black phone in her hand. Her lifeline. Her leash. She looked at the single contact on the screen.
Dante.
He had erased her past, murdered her tormentor, and built a magnificent prison around her. He had given her everything a woman could possibly want, except for the one thing she craved, a choice. Staring at her reflection in the phone's dark screen, she saw the woman from the night before, the elegant stranger with the haunted eyes. That woman wasn't her. But the terrified girl from Chicago was gone, too. Erased. In their place was a new entity, a possession, a symbol, Dante Moretti's fated mate. And as she clutched the phone in her hand, a cold, hard resolve began to form in the pit of her stomach. He thought he could control her, mold her, own her. He thought the performance was over. But it had only just begun. She would play the part of the queen. She would sit on the throne he'd built for her. And from the heart of her gilded cage, she would find a way to be free. She had to. Chapter 6. The days that followed fell into a strange, suffocating rhythm. Alara existed in a state of suspended animation, a ghost in a palace. She woke each morning in Dante's bed, always on her side, always with the chasm of expensive sheets between them. And each morning, she would find herself having migrated in her sleep, drawn to his warmth, only to wake to the heavy, possessive weight of his arm over her before he would release her and begin his day. He was a creature of intense discipline. He rose before the sun to work out in a home gym she hadn't known existed. He would then disappear into his office, taking and making calls in low, clipped Italian. His world was one of shadows and violence, conducted through encrypted channels and spoken in coded language. She was his silent, beautiful audience. Her rebellion was a quiet, internal thing. She began to learn. She watched him, studied him the way a prisoner studies a guard. She learned the subtle shift in his tone that meant he was displeased, the slight tightening of his jaw that signaled a threat being neutralized. She learned to read the ebb and flow of his power through the hushed conversations of his staff. The phone, her leash, became her weapon. She didn't use it to call for help. Who would she call? What would she say? Instead, she used its constant connection to him. When he was on calls, she would sometimes press the button, listening in for a few seconds before hanging up. She gleaned fragments, names: Silvio, the Petrov Syndicate, a shipment at the docks. She was assembling a puzzle without the picture on the box, but a picture was slowly, terrifyingly beginning to form. One afternoon, driven by a bout of claustrophobic restlessness, she found the grand piano. She hadn't played in years, not since her mother had passed away, but her fingers remembered. She sat down and began to play a simple, melancholic Chopin nocturne, the notes filling the sterile silence of the penthouse. She became so lost in the music that she didn't hear him enter the room. The final, soft chord hung in the air, and she became aware of his presence. He was standing by the fireplace, watching her, his expression one she had never seen before. It was not possessive, not predatory. It was unguarded, almost vulnerable. "I didn't know you played," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "There's a lot you don't know about me," she replied, her hands still resting on the keys. "Then tell me," he said, walking toward her. He sat on the bench beside her, his proximity both a comfort and a threat. "Tell me something real." It was the first time he had asked her anything about herself that wasn't a tactical assessment. She looked down at her hands. "My mother taught me." She was a music teacher. She used to say that music was the only language that couldn't lie. "She was a wise woman," he said quietly. He reached out, not to touch her, but to gently press a single, low key on the piano. The note was a deep, mournful sound. "My mother, she loved opera. She used to say it was the only art form that truly understood the Italian soul. All passion, tragedy, and love." He spoke of his mother in the past tense. In that shared moment of remembered grief, a fragile, tentative bridge formed in the chasm between them. "What happened to her?" Alara asked, her voice a near whisper. Dante's jaw tightened, the brief softness vanishing. "She was a casualty of this life. A victim of my father's enemies." He stood abruptly, the moment of connection shattered. The past is the past. It is a lesson, not a life. The wall was back up, higher and colder than before. He had shown her a flicker of the man behind the monster, only to snatch it away. But it was too late. She had seen it. She knew now that the quiet he craved from her was a balm for a wound that went deeper than she could imagine. His response to the new intimacy was to tighten her leash. The next day, he announced they would be going out. Not to a business dinner, but on a date. The destination was a private showing at an art gallery he owned. The entire building was cleared for their visit. They walked through silent, empty halls, surrounded by priceless works of art, with Leo and 2 other guards trailing them at a discreet distance. "Do you like it?" he asked, gesturing to a chaotic, vibrant abstract painting. "It's beautiful," she said, and it was. But the beauty was tainted by the sterile, controlled environment. "I think I'd like it more if there were other people here. Art is supposed to be shared, isn't it? To be talked about." "Sharing creates vulnerabilities," he said flatly. "There is no one here to distract you. No one to threaten you. You can simply enjoy the art. I have given you a perfect, safe experience." "You've given me a sterile one," she countered, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "This isn't a date, Dante. It's a curated exhibition. It's another room in the penthouse, just with different walls. It's not real." Rage, cold and sharp, flashed in his eyes. "Real is Marco hunting you in the street. Real is Silvio Bellini sizing you up like a piece of meat. Real is a bullet from a rival who sees you as a way to get to me. This," He gestured around the empty gallery, his voice a low, vicious snarl. "This is the only safety I can give you. It is a gilded cage, yes, but it is a cage I built to protect you, not to punish you. Why can't you see that?" "Because I don't want to be protected," she cried, the words tearing from her throat. "I want to be trusted. I want to be a person, not a possession you keep locked in a vault." The silence that followed was deafening. They stood there, surrounded by silent masterpieces, their own raw, ugly emotions on display. For the first time, she hadn't just pushed back, she had laid his entire motivation bare and rejected it. His jaw worked, his throat moving as he swallowed. He looked at her, and for a second, she thought he might finally break, that he might finally understand. But then the mask of cold control slammed back into place. "The car is waiting," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "We're going home." That night, the chasm in the bed felt wider than ever. But Alara didn't feel defeated. She felt awake. She had pushed the mountain, and while it hadn't moved, she had felt it tremble. Later, in the dead of night, she heard his tablet buzz on the nightstand. Driven by a new, reckless courage, she slipped out of bed. His back was to her, his breathing deep and even. She picked up the device. It was an encrypted message, a single line of text that made her blood run cold. "Silvio's meeting with the Petrovs is confirmed." The subject, the asset. The asset. That was her. Silvio Bellini, the man who had dismissed her, was colluding with a rival syndicate. About her. She wasn't just a symbol to be displayed. She was a piece on a chessboard, a liability to be traded or eliminated. Dante thought the danger was outside the walls of his fortress. He was wrong. The snake was already inside. And he was so blinded by his need to protect her from the world, he couldn't see the betrayal happening right under his nose. She slipped back into bed, her heart pounding. The game had changed. This was no longer about her freedom. It was about her survival. And to survive, she would have to do the one thing Dante would never allow. She would have to make him trust her. She would have to become his queen not just in name, but in fact. Chapter 7. The next morning, Alara played her part. She was subdued, compliant. When Dante left for his office, she did not retreat to the piano or the closet. She walked to his office door and knocked. He looked up from his work, his expression wary, surprised. "I want to understand," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Your business. The threats. I can't be your partner if I'm kept in the dark." He stared at her, suspicion warring with a flicker of something else in his eyes. "My business is not a world for you, Alara." "Marco's world wasn't for me either, but I lived in it," she countered. "Silvio's world isn't for me, but you sat me at his table. Your enemies see me as your weakness because you treat me like one. A fragile thing to be hidden away. Let me be your strength.
Teach me.
Trust me." The plea hung in the air between them. It was the biggest gamble of her life. Dante was silent for a long time, his gaze boring into her as if trying to read her soul. "What brought this on?" he asked, his voice soft, dangerous. She had to choose her words carefully. "Last night," she said, "you said you built the cage to protect me. I believe you. But a true queen isn't protected by her castle walls. She helps her king command the battlefield. I'm tired of being a liability, Dante. I want to be an asset." She used the word deliberately, watching for his reaction. A muscle feathered in his jaw. He knew, or he suspected. "What do you know about assets?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. "I know that Silvio Bellini is meeting with the Petrovs to discuss me," she said, laying her card on the table. The air in the room went still and cold. All pretense of civility dropped from his face, replaced by the lethal calm of a predator. "How do you know that?" "Your tablet buzzed last night. I saw the message." His rage was a palpable thing, a wave of cold fury that washed over her. She braced herself for an explosion, for the end of their fragile truce. But it didn't come. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, a slow, dangerous smile touching his lips. It was a smile of pure, chilling admiration. "You have been a busier little mouse than I thought," he said. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk.
Sit.
It seems it is time for your lessons to begin. For the rest of the day, he initiated her into his world. He explained the complex web of alliances and rivalries between the families that controlled the underworld. He told her about the Petrovs, a brutal Russian syndicate trying to muscle into his territory. And he told her about Silvio Bellini, an old guard boss from LA who saw Dante's fated mate not as a blessing, but as a romantic foolishness that made him vulnerable. Silvio thinks I have gone soft, Dante explained, his voice laced with contempt. He sees you as a weakness he can exploit to force a partnership with the Petrovs and take a piece of my city. So, what are you going to do? She asked. Traditionally, I would have Silvio and the Petrov brothers retired before they even sat down to their first drink, he said bluntly. But that would start a war. A war that would put you in even greater danger. So, what's the alternative? The alternative, he said, his eyes gleaming with a ruthless intelligence, is to beat them at their own game. We will use their perception of you as a weakness against them. And so, the plan was born. Not his plan, but their plan. A dangerous, high-stakes gambit with her at the very center. Dante was hosting a major charity gala at the Morpheus Tower in 3 days. It was the biggest social event of the season in Las Vegas, a place where the legitimate world and the underworld openly mingled. Silvio and the Petrov brothers would all be there. They will try to get to you, Dante stated. They will try to isolate you, threaten you, perhaps even try to abduct you from under my nose to prove my weakness. And I'll let them, Alara said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. I'll play the part of the terrified, fragile mate. I will let one of them get me alone. And then you will wear this, Dante said, opening a drawer and producing a delicate, diamond-encrusted hairpin. The center stone is a panic button. Press it, and my men will be on them in seconds. The pin itself is also quite sharp. This isn't enough, Alara insisted. If I'm going to do this, I do it my way. I need to be more than just bait. Dante raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Go on. They think I'm stupid. A trophy. I need to get one of them, probably Silvio, to say something incriminating. Something that proves his conspiracy with the Petrovs. I need a way to record him. Dante's predatory smile returned. I believe I have just the thing. The next 2 days were a blur of intense preparation. He taught her how to spot surveillance, how to recognize codes, how to use the hairpin not just as a panic button, but as a weapon. He fitted her with a pair of diamond earrings, one of which contained a state-of-the-art recording device. They rehearsed the plan over and over, turning the penthouse into a stage, with Sophia and Leo playing the parts of her would-be abductors. During these sessions, something shifted between them. The dynamic of captor and captive bled into something else, a partnership forged in mutual danger. He treated her not as a fragile object, but as an intelligent, capable soldier. And she, in turn, began to see past the ruthless mafia boss to the brilliant strategist, the man who was willing to risk a piece of his kingdom on the strength of her courage. The night of the gala, the tension in the penthouse was electric. Alara stood before the mirror, a vision in a gown of blood-red silk that left her back bare. The diamond earrings glittered. The hairpin was tucked securely into her elaborate updo. Dante came to stand behind her, his hands settling on her hips. Their eyes met in the mirror. Are you afraid? He asked, his voice a low murmur. Terrified, she admitted honestly. Good, he said. Fear keeps you sharp. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. Leo will never be more than 10 feet from you. I will be watching every second. The moment you press that pin, all hell will break loose. You will be safe. I know, she said. And the terrifying part was, she did. She trusted him. Not to be good, not to be kind, but to be exactly what he was. A ruthless king who would burn the world to the ground to protect his queen. She turned in his arms. There's one more thing, she said, her voice dropping. If this works, if we survive this, I will not be your prisoner anymore. We will be partners. In all things. Equals. He looked down at her, the raw possessiveness in his eyes warring with a newfound respect. You already are, he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. You have been from the moment you had the courage to face me. Now, let's go show them what a queen truly is. He leaned down and kissed her. It was not a kiss of branding or possession. It was a kiss of searing, desperate intensity. A warrior's kiss before a battle. A king's kiss for his queen. And as she kissed him back, surrendering to the dark, dangerous pull of the man she had come to love against all reason, she knew there was no turning back. Tonight, she would either secure her throne or die trying. Chapter 8. The grand ballroom of the Morpheus Tower was a glittering universe of its own. Chandeliers like constellations of diamonds dripped from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden light over a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The air hummed with the sound of a live orchestra, hushed conversations, and the clinking of champagne flutes. It was a beautiful, civilized veneer over a pit of vipers, and Alara was walking directly into it. Dante's hand was a warm, possessive brand on her lower back. As they descended the grand staircase, a hush fell over the room, followed by a wave of whispers. Every eye was on them. On him, the reclusive king of Las Vegas, and on her, the mysterious woman at his side. She played her part, her expression serene, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, a picture of adored, untouchable beauty. But beneath the silk of her gown, her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. They moved through the crowd, Dante greeting associates with a nod, his gaze constantly sweeping the room, mapping every face, every exit. Leo, a silent, imposing shadow, was never more than a few steps away. She spotted the Petrov brothers first, three hulking, brutish men in ill-fitting suits, their coarse features a stark contrast to the polished elegance around them. They were watching her with hungry, predatory eyes. Then she saw Silvio Bellini. He was holding court near the champagne fountain, looking every inch the elder statesman of the Mafia. He saw them and his lips curved into that cold, reptilian smile. He raised his glass in a mock toast. The game had begun. For the first hour, Dante kept her glued to his side. They made the rounds, a royal couple receiving their court. But Alara could feel the net tightening. Silvio's men were subtly, skillfully, moving into position, creating a perimeter. The Petrovs were drifting closer. The signal came when Dante was pulled into a conversation with the governor of Nevada. It was the opportunity they had been waiting for. "I'm going to get some air," she murmured to Dante, touching his arm. It was their prearranged cue. He nodded, his eyes flashing a silent warning. "Be careful." She turned and began to walk toward the terrace doors, feigning a slight unease with the crowds. As predicted, Leo followed, but at a more discreet distance. She stepped out onto the terrace, a wide marble expanse overlooking the glittering, endless river of the Strip. She leaned against the balustrade, pretending to admire the view, her senses on high alert. The cool night air felt good on her bare skin. A beautiful view. Silvio's voice. He had appeared beside her as silently as a snake. She feigned a startled gasp, clutching her arms. "Mr. Bellini, you startled me." "My apologies, my dear," he said, his eyes raking over her. "I simply wanted to express my admiration. That is a magnificent gown. Dante has exquisite taste in everything." "He's very generous," she said, her voice a fragile whisper. She let a slight tremor enter her hand as she reached up to touch the diamond earring, activating the recorder. "Generous, yes," Silvio said, moving a step closer. "But perhaps a little distracted lately. This business with the fated mate, it has made him careless. He brings you here, displays you like the crown jewels, but he does not see the thieves gathering in the shadows." "Thieves?" she asked, widening her eyes in mock terror. "Men who feel that Dante's empire has grown too large," Silvio said, his voice a conspiratorial purr. "Men like the Petrovs. They are not sophisticated. They are animals. They see a beautiful thing and they want to take it, to break it." He leaned closer, his cologne acrid and cloying. "They believe that if they were to take you, Dante would be crippled. He would give them anything to get you back. A piece of the strip, perhaps. Control of the unions. This was it. Her heart pounded. But Dante would never allow that. He has men everywhere. Silvio laughed, a low, ugly sound. His men are loyal to him. But are they loyal enough to start a war with the Russians over a woman? Even a beautiful one? Business is business, my dear. And you have become bad for business. Suddenly, Leo, who had been standing guard by the doors, was intercepted by two of Silvio's men. They engaged him in a conversation, flanking him, effectively boxing him in. It was happening. What do you want? Alara whispered, letting her fear sound genuine. I want to restore order, Silvio said. And I want to offer you a way out. This life, it is not for you. You are a canary in a cage.
Come with me.
I will ensure your safety. I can give you a new life, far from here. Money, a new identity. All I ask in return is your cooperation. Cooperation. You will leave with the Petrovs tonight. Quietly. No fuss. Dante will be negotiated with. In the end, everyone gets what they want. And what do you get, Silvio? His smile was triumphant. My rightful place as the true power on the West Coast. With the Petrovs as my enforcers and Dante's empire fractured, order will be restored. I see, she said softly. She had it. A full confession of conspiracy. Now she just had to get out. I need to think. There is no time to think, Silvio said, his patience gone. His hand shot out, grabbing her arm. You will come now. She stumbled back, pulling against his grip.
No.
Let me go. From the corner of her eye, she saw the Petrov brothers emerge from the shadows at the far end of the terrace. They were blocking her only other exit. The trap had been sprung.
It was time.
Her hand flew to her hair, her fingers fumbling for the hairpin. But before she could press the button, a shot rang out. It wasn't loud, more of a suppressed thwomp. Silvio's eyes went wide, a small, dark hole appearing in the center of his forehead. His grip on her arm went slack, and he crumpled to the marble floor without a sound. Alara stared in shock, not at Silvio, but at the man standing behind him. It was Leo. He held a silenced pistol, and his two interlocutors lay unconscious at his feet. But that wasn't what made her gasp. Behind Leo, emerging from the ballroom with a face of thunderous, apocalyptic rage, was Dante. His eyes were not on the dead man at her feet. They were locked on her. The plan had gone wrong. Horribly wrong. They hadn't tried to abduct her. They had tried to assassinate her. Silvio's offer had been a lie, a final bit of psychological torture before the kill. The shot she had heard hadn't been from Leo. It had been from one of the Petrovs, aimed at her. Leo had simply been faster, taking out Silvio and his men in the blink of an eye. Chaos erupted. The Petrovs, their primary plan failed, opened fire. The glass doors to the ballroom shattered. People screamed. Dante's men, a small army in tuxedos, materialized from nowhere, returning fire, forming a human wall around him as he strode toward her. Alara. Dante's roar cut through the pandemonium. One of the Petrovs, a mountain of a man, broke through the line and charged her. There was no time to think. Adrenaline and the instincts Dante had drilled into her took over. As the man lunged, she ripped the diamond pin from her hair. She dropped low, under his grasping arms, and drove the pin's sharpened point with all her strength into the soft flesh of his thigh. He howled in pain and surprise, his leg buckling. It gave her the opening she needed. She scrambled away, back toward Dante. Dante reached her, pulling her behind him, his body a solid shield. He had a gun in his hand, and he moved with a lethal grace that was terrifying to behold. The firefight was short and brutal. His men were disciplined, professional, and utterly ruthless. Within moments, the remaining Petrovs were dead or neutralized. The terrace was suddenly silent, the only sounds the distant sirens and the tinkling of broken glass. The air was thick with the smell of cordite. Alara was shaking, her entire body trembling with reaction. Dante turned to her, his face a pale, grim mask. He holstered his weapon and pulled her into his arms, his hold so tight it was almost painful. He buried his face in her hair, his body trembling with the force of his own adrenaline. "I almost lost you," he said, his voice a raw, ragged thing she had never heard before. "I almost lost you." He pulled back, his hands framing her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. His eyes were blazing with a terrifying mixture of relief, fury, and a love so fierce it was a physical force. "Never again," he growled. "Never again will I let you out of my sight. Never."
He didn't need to say it.
She knew. The gamble was over. She had won her place, but the price was a cage whose walls had just become infinitely higher. As his mouth found hers in a desperate, bruising kiss, she knew she was no longer just his fated mate or his queen. She was the very center of his soul, the heart of his kingdom. And he would tear the world apart, piece by piece, before he let anyone threaten his heart again.
Epilogue.
3 years later, the view from the penthouse had not changed. The river of neon still flowed through the desert night, a testament to the city's vibrant, predatory soul. But for Alara, everything was different. She stood before the wall of glass, not as a prisoner looking out, but as a queen surveying her domain. "Mama, he's cheating," a small voice, filled with indignant fury, broke the silence. Alara turned, a smile touching her lips. In the center of the vast living room, a ferocious game of Candyland was underway. 2.5-year-old Marco Moretti, named not for the ghost of her past but for Dante's grandfather, scowled at his father, his dark eyes, so like Dante's, narrowed in suspicion. "I am not cheating, Mio Leone," Dante said, his voice the picture of innocence. He was sprawled on the priceless Persian rug, looking utterly out of place and perfectly at home in a pair of soft jeans and a gray t-shirt. "It is called strategy. You picked the Queen Frostine card on purpose," Marco accused, pointing a chubby finger. "That's not strategy. That's cheating." Alara walked over and scooped her son into her arms. He smelled of milk and righteous fury. "What's the problem, baby?" "Dada is a cheater," he grumbled, burying his face in her neck. "Your father is a lot of things," Alara said, shooting Dante a look of amusement over their son's head. "But he doesn't need to cheat to win. He just rewrites the rules." Dante's mouth curved into the slow, wolfish smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "She knows me too well." Their life had settled into a new kind of normal. A normal that included a full-time security detail for their toddler and board meetings that were sometimes interrupted by shootouts. But it was their normal. The war that Silvio's betrayal had sparked had been short, bloody, and decisive. Dante, with Alara at his side, had not just defended his empire, he had expanded it. The Moretti name was now spoken in hushed, respectful tones from coast to coast. And Alara was no longer just his mate. She was his partner, his advisor, the soft voice of counsel that tempered his ruthless instincts. She ran the legitimate side of their businesses, the casinos, the hotels, the charitable foundations, with a skill and intelligence that had earned her the respect and fear of their associates. They called her the Velvet Queen, soft on the surface, with a will of pure steel beneath. "Leo is here," Dante said, getting to his feet. "We have that meeting." Alara sighed. "The one about the Port Authority?" "The very same." He came over and kissed her, a deep, lingering kiss that was still as potent as the first time. "I'll handle it. You stay with Marco." "No," she said, pulling back. "We'll handle it. Together. Marco can stay with Sophia." She looked down at her son. "Mama and Dada have to go talk to some grumpy men, okay?" Marco nodded solemnly. "Make them not be grumpy." "We'll do our best," Dante promised, ruffling his son's dark hair. As they walked toward the private elevator, Dante's hand found hers. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low. "It could be unpleasant." "I've faced down Silvio Bellini's assassins on a terrace, Dante," she said, her voice laced with dry humor. "I think I can handle a few corrupt union bosses." He stopped and pulled her into his arms, his gaze intense. "I never thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. For what? For not just surviving this life, but for thriving in it. For making it a home. For giving me him. His gaze flickered toward their son. For giving me the quiet. The chaos in his soul had never completely disappeared, but she had learned to be its anchor. Their love was not a gentle thing. It was a fierce, possessive, all-consuming bond forged in danger and darkness. It was a tempest and a harbor, all at once. You found me, Dante, she said softly, her hand coming up to cup his jaw. We saved each other. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for a brief moment. My queen, he murmured. Later that night, long after the grumpy men had been dealt with and their son was asleep in his bed, Alara found herself standing at the window once more. Dante came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the endless, glittering lights. Do you ever miss it? He asked quietly. The normal world? She thought for a moment, remembering the exhausted, terrified girl on the plane. A girl running from one cage, only to fall into another. But the cage had transformed, its bars melting away to become the walls of a kingdom. Her kingdom. I was never free, Dante, she said, her voice filled with a certainty that was bone deep. Not really. I was just surviving. You didn't take my freedom. You showed me what it meant to have real power. The power to protect the people you love. She turned in his arms, her gaze meeting his. I wasn't a tired lady who fell asleep on the wrong shoulder, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. I was a queen who was tired of hiding, and I fell asleep on the only shoulder in the world strong enough to carry my throne. He looked at her, his love and adoration a tangible force in the quiet of the room. He didn't need to say a word. She was his fated mate, his partner, the mother of his heir. She was his beginning and his end. She had woken up as the Billionaire Mafia's fated mate in Las Vegas. And she wouldn't have had it any other way.
The end.